Welcome to Potpourri. I'm Murdell McFarlin, and our guest today is doctoral student Mr. Terry Thomas. Mr. Thomas is an exceptional civil rights activist. He is an exceptional artist. He is an exceptional illustrator, and he's been engaged in projects and political matters that affect our community for many, many years. And we're very happy to have you here with us today.
Glad to be here.
I'd like to start with just a brief explanation or illustration of how are you from three counties in the state of Georgia all at one time?
Well, the first county, Chris County, I was there until I was 5, and the rest of the time was spent in Wilcox, which I graduated in 75. I came here at 19 years of age, straight out of high school, to Marshtown College. Well, I'll be 59 next Tuesday. Looking back, the 20 years I've amassed living in Atlanta at 19 and leaving, going to Florida for 20, and coming back, I've been back 12 years. It's like Atlanta was second home.
You spent the greater part, if not all of your life, in the South, between Georgia and Florida.
Mm-hmm.
There must have been a reason, and a very compelling one, that got you to leave Georgia and go to Florida. What was happening in the South, and what caused you, as a minority, especially an African-American young man, to leave Georgia, the Mecca, Atlanta, and go to Florida?
Well, I was an artist, freelance, from 80 to 82, and to be quite frank with, I was starving.
Okay.
And
starving artist.
Starving artist.
That's common. That's reasonable.
Yeah, about 80 pounds ago. And my cousin in Florida said that there was a job at the local middle school to do the school yearbook and newspaper, because the guy had walked off the job, and then he needed somebody desperately, and that freelancing thing wasn't working out so well. So I said, okay, I'll come. And I went to Florida, did the interview, and it was a Alpha Phi Alpha brother who was the assistant principal who heard me say one paragraph and just said, "Hi, that man." And
Was that because you were his fraternity brother, or because you were just brilliant in what you did? That's not a fair question.
well,
I asked it.
back then I was into presentation. And to be a freelance artist, graphic designer, you have to present. And being articulate was something I tried very hard to master. So when he heard me speak, and the principal, who was white, had some reservation because I spoke in sort of like a monotone. Mm-hmm. And he explained to him, from the region of the country, Atlanta, where he's from, that's how they speak. They think before they speak.
Right.
And it may sound like he's pondering,
Yeah.
but he's...
We get that a lot. That's a criticism on how we talk in the South. And, it's in all the literature. Mm-hmm. They're very slow, articulate. It kind of drives a lot of people crazy.
Yeah. So they said, by the way, Mr. Thomas, the class comes with, the yearbook assignment comes with 5 classes of journalism.
My goodness.
Never took a journalism course in my life. And, being the whip I was like, when they asked, can you do it? I said, sure, I can do it.
So you certainly learn how really quick,
Yeah,
right?
I just get the textbook and go through the textbook and learn on OJT, on-the-job training. And that's how we did it back in the 70s.
Now, this was in the 70s.
I mean, 1983.
Okay, so this is post-civil rights. So you go into Florida from Georgia. Now, Jim Crowism was theoretically prior to the civil rights movement, actually, which had a lot of motivation for the movement. Did you experience a lot of segregated, still the lingerings of segregation in Florida?
I grew up 7 years segregation, from grades 1 through 7, segregation, and grades 8 through 5, integration, in Georgia, Wilcox County. What was happening in the 80s in Florida was You know, Palm Beach County is one of the richest counties in the country, with the highest per capita per income in the country.
What's its poverty level then? Back then, what was the poverty level?
It was extreme. It was a situation of extremes. On the island of Palm Beach, you got the Kellogg's and the Kennedys. In West, you had areas known as Belglade, Pahokee, and South Bay, the predominantly black farm areas where they, 90 to 95% of the students on free and reduced lunch. Now, I had fun with those kids, though.
Is that the students that you were teaching?
Yes, for a long time. I taught 6 through 12, mainly middle school.
5 courses every day, and produced a yearbook.
And produced a yearbook and the newspaper.
So you work 18 hours a day, every day?
I took my work home with me. I mean, it was not a clock thing, you know. I had to learn how to do the yearbook. I had to learn how to do the newspaper. And plus, I had to read the text on journalism to understand the concept.
Let's just take a break right this second, and we'll be right back.
Hey, you.
Yeah, you. Getting that college education? What are you gonna do? Graduate and take some office job? Be like everybody else?
Or will you dare do something different?
Like, be a teacher. You could be my teacher. You got the skills.
The smarts?
Yes, you. You could be the teacher I never forget.
That'd be cool.
Does that corporate job even have recess? What are you gonna make of yourself?
What are you gonna make of me?
Hey, look, it's those guys.
Let's hit those pearly whites, man.
Ooh, cute.
Are
you good to try?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Sir, go and step out of the vehicle for me.
Yes, sir.
See ya, buddy. Today, Sean's got a hearing. We'll see how it goes. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
Hart, what's going on? I'm leaving. Why? What did I do? Not enough. You constantly ignore me. You barely eat anything healthy. You're half as active as you used to be. The pressure is just too much. I quit. Okay, I get it. I'll do better. Just please, don't leave. Okay. But remember, if I go, you go.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you. Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Welcome back. I'm Murdell McFarlin, and this is Potpourri. We're in conversation with Mr. Terry Thomas. He's a doctoral student here at Clark Atlanta University, but most of all, he's an activist for social and political justice for all of us, especially here in the South. We're talking about Georgia House Bill 481 and the impact that it will have on the public school system's curriculum. Mr. Thomas, why would there be major opposition to a bill that would allow the history of all cultures to be included in our public school curriculum?
Conservatism / racism. When it comes to the truth being taught from an African-centered perspective, Jewish, Latino, women, and Native American, there's a certain segment of society want to be and maintain a status quo of his story and not the rest of the story. And in history, in Florida, when we first started working with getting the law changed, introducing the bill to change the law, it's been bound there, by the way, 22 years.
Okay.
And
most states already have. I mean,
it's only 5 states.
Only 5 states.
Florida,
have bills.
Arkansas, Colorado, Michigan, and Illinois, and I'm trying very hard to make Georgia number 6.
Now, let me ask a real naive question. Does this mean that the other states do not need a bill, that their school curriculums already include the histories of the cultures represented in their states? Does this mean that only 6 states in the entire United States actually have curriculum that are multicultural?
That means the latter. Only 6 states have it. My ambition is to go nationwide, and all 50 states have diversity and multiculturalism from an African-centered perspective.
Now, what is an African? What did you just say? You said an
African-centered.
What is an African-centered perspective?
My mentor, Dr. Walter Palmer from Morris Brown College back in the 70s, used to put the idea towards us about our identity and who we were. And the main professor and researcher was Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop of Senegal. And he wrote a book and did his thesis on the African origin of civilization, as opposed to the Greco-Roman storyline.
That point, I just want to, and I'm going to interrupt you some because I just want to be really clear and fair as we look at these issues. Now, you said it's an African position that's proposed as opposed to a European Greco system of history. Is there not room for both in our curriculum?
Well, you know, when I speak in public, I had the opportunity to travel to Ethiopia in 2010 with a group called WADU, World African Diaspora Union. I'm a member of that. Dr. Leonard Jeffries is the president. And I had a chance to stand before the bones of Lucy. That's the oldest humanoid form. Lucy is 3 million years old. And when you look at civilization, the development from the Rift Valley in Ethiopia and the zenith and the high civilization of Kemet or Egypt, knowing that they began 100,000 years prior to Alexander the Great, we had a calendar in 4142 BC created by black African Egyptians. We had the step pyramids designed by Imhotep. We had all the conventions of modern civilization out of Africa. And that's what I mean by African-centered, telling the truth as opposed to the Greeks starting math and...
Well, let's presume then the traditional histories that we have are in fact factual from the perspective in which they're presented. And that Afrocentricity, your request is to add it to the existing histories that are in our public schools so that students become more well-rounded and well-versed on all of the contributions by all of the cultures that we know of to our modern-day society. Let's just make that presumption that that may be more appropriate than one or the other. But you're not proposing one or the other histories.
No.
You're proposing the Afrocentricity be included into the current histories or the current courses in various parts of the curriculum in the Atlanta Public Schools or in general?
In the state of Georgia and across America, this is a national trend. With those 5 states and the 45 remaining states, this is the trend that began in 1992 when I ascribed to the NEA, the policy towards black studies and Afrocentrism. And since 92, public education has adopted black history as a part of the process.
Across the nation?
In those 5 states.
Only in those 5 states.
It could be more because that was written some time ago. But the idea is to teach history from the perspective of the indigenous people or the people most affected. A pedagogy of the oppressed, so to speak. When you think in terms of Native Americans, Latinos, Jewish Holocaust, even women, there is a certain whitewash of those histories. And we want to teach.
So that is what you're trying to correct, the incorrectness of the history of
Yes.
indigenous people, as opposed to imposing the histories of indigenous people on the majority culture. Is that appropriate? Is that a correct statement?
The majority culture probably would look at it as an imposition.
Why would that be? And honestly, I would just be frank with you. I could see how I agree with you that they would. What I'd like to know is, how could it be beneficial? How is it beneficial for the majority culture to know more and their children be exposed to the truisms of the histories of indigenous people and their contributions to our civilization?
I think the climate that we're in now with Ferguson, Ohio, New York, the racial climate, I think if we better understood ourselves, we would have better race relations. When you think in terms of this year's political race, building walls, surveillance in Muslims, heightening the press, but the race button. I think teaching these pedagogies of the oppressed that I mentioned brings us to a better understanding in terms of race relations. And that, I think, is at the core of education. Education, and I've worked with students from 6th through 12th grade for 20 years. My students, once they learned about their African ancestry, I brought in African sculpture, African art, and I had them draw pictures and compositions based on their African heritage. When we did murals, I asked the Latino kids to do pictures of Jose Marti or Simon Bolivar, or the Caribbean kids, I would ask them to do Toussaint Overture. And I could see the improvement in their self-esteem just from what they said that they would want to do with their talent. Because I would always encourage them to be better than your competition. 2 times better, because that's what it's going to take. You can't be equal. You have to be 2 times better.
I understand that, and I think that's would be a natural outcome. If you know, the more you know about yourself and your own culture, the better your self-esteem, and the more you should be confident about who you are and how you relate to the world. But realistically, let's say you didn't have African American children or West Indian children or African children that you were teaching. Let's say you were in a predominantly Caucasian school system. Would that really, how would you teach Afrocentricity too? Or how would you teach the histories of indigenous or minority cultures to a culture that they don't need it? I mean, they don't think they need it?
Dr. Pelham McDaniels, who's over the archives at Emory University, and I, at the ASALA convention held last year's summer.
And ASALA is
the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, founded by the father of Black history, Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And we just celebrated our 100th anniversary this past year in 2015. It was started in 1915. Okay. And Dr. McDaniels and I, we said, well, we're really going to have to go after the textbooks, because that is the crux of the matter, that the version of history and sociology is so Eurocentric. The textbooks have to be changed. We have to get people like Dr. Malifia Asante, Dr. Maulana Karinga, who have written books on Afrocentric subject matter. And we have to convince Texas, because that's where most of the textbooks in high school come from, Texas, that they need to revise and be more
How
true.
do you convince them? On what grounds?
On the evidence that Lucy was discovered in Ethiopia, that Pythagoras did not discover math because Imhotep created a pyramid made of, which is the manifestation of engineering and math. Just shattering the mythology of Greco-Roman superiority.
Greco-Roman superiority. You made reference to that several times in this discussion. And what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes talking about the realism of such a changing the textbooks. You change the textbooks. But then you have young teachers of all races teaching.
Mm-hmm.
They see the new textbooks. It goes against their conditioning and what they learned. What do you do, or is there anything in place to help the young teachers who really are the people that have to use the textbooks to teach the children? So if they're dealing with information that they're not comfortable with, that goes against what they were taught, how do you get them to change what they're teaching and how they use the textbooks, or even if they will?
Well, that's where advocacy comes in. I'm a proud member of the National Education Association, lifetime member, and teacher training and teacher preparation, those workshops, multicultural nowadays, but certainly Afrocentrism is a part and parcel to that. So we have to re-educate our teaching corps.
Re-educate your teaching corps. How long do you think it will take? Let's just say if you do get the textbooks changed, that may take, 3 or 4 more years? Timeline on that would be kind of accurate. If it started today, if you got the textbook makers to say, okay, we will embrace this. And it takes 3 to 4 years to change that, the content of the textbooks. So that puts you at another generation of college graduates, of students that have gone to college and teacher education, that are out there in the school systems. So we're looking at maybe, and to reorientate them through teacher training to be accepting of this new content. How long do you think it may be, just a projection, before we get to a place where the textbooks and the teaching of the textbooks in our public schools, specifically Georgia and Atlanta, how long before we get there, where it's actually implemented and the students are learning the Afrocentric perspective, learning from the Afrocentric perspective?
Well, first of all, we got to pass this House Bill 481 and because and make it mandatory, because if you teach it as an elective, it's not going to work. But if you make it...
Why won't it work if it's taught as an elective? You're talking to us that don't know too much about the school systems today, perhaps, the public school system. So I'm trying to see what we can actually say, or what you can share with us that will prompt people to support House Bill 481 that's currently in the Georgia House of Representatives. Is that correct?
Right.
In committee.
Education Committee.
Education Committee. Okay. How do we convince the electorate to support it?
Well, I was talking to Rabbi Berg of the Temple on Peace Street, the Jewish Community Center. And we have to galvanize those communities, those aspects of the bill, the Latino, the Native American women, and
And African American.
African Americans. And Rabbi Berg is on board. He thinks it's a fantastic idea. And Ron Mayo, who introduced the bill, indicated that it didn't make it out of committee this year. So what we had to do over the next year, Terry, we have to pull everybody together and create a coalition so that the debate will have people behind it. And March 16th, I organized teacher rally at the Rotunda down under the Capitol Dome. I called together Georgia Association of Educators, Georgia Federation of Teachers, and Page to come together for a teacher rally. And we all voiced our opposition to, number one, the Opportunity School District fostered by Governor Deal, and in support of HB 41.
It's certainly been a pleasure speaking with you this afternoon, and we thank you for sharing all that you shared with us about House Bill 41 and all of the other matters and concerns that affect our nation and our country surrounding it. I'm Murdell McFarlin, and this has been Potpourri. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Asante Sana.